Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Michael Steele podcast. Now, you all know my guest today. You know him. You love him. He's an infamous negative ad maker, a leading conservative critic of Donald Trump, and the co-founder of the Lincoln Project. He's a brother from another mother. I love this guy. Rick Wilson will join me to discuss Ukraine, the January 6th Commission, and just the general crazy of the crazy. Right here on the Michael Steele podcast. My conversation begins with him next. Well, everybody, like I said, you know him, you love him, and you can't wait till he gets his claws into folks. Rick Wilson. Welcome to
Michael,
the podcast.
how are you, sir?
Hey, man, it's always a thrill when you're in the neighborhood, and I appreciate you very much, man. I really do.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to get into some of the work that you're doing right now, because it's turning some heads yet again. The work coming out of Lincoln Project and your appearances on air. But I just want to step back for a moment as we kind of look at the world that we have in front of us.
Right.
Here we are about 7-8 months out from a general election that's going to be pivotal. And I would argue in some cases more so than 2020 in many respects. You've got a global stage, right, where Putin has decided to call Biden's bluff, essentially, and actually the bluff of a number of recent presidents, and just move right in, right, to say, I'm going to take this and ain't shit y'all can do about it. And then domestically at home, you've got, folks wringing their hands, and I'm not going to downplay it. I think rightly so in some cases, over inflation and over the cost of things. And quite honestly are, again, getting back to how I started, that looking at the November election, say, hey, let's give power back to those guys. What's your assessment of the state of affairs at the moment, and as we kind of see ourselves right now?
Look, I have to say this. The Republicans are dragging the Democrats into the place they take them to die very frequently, which is culture war. And they would love to have this election be about gas prices, inflation, don't say gay, trans stuff, abortion, and immigration. That would be that's their happy space. They want to get the Democrats to fight them on. And I think the Democrats need to go on offense sooner than later on the economy. I think they need to invert this culture war thing, particularly the whole groomers and pedophiles line that has become the obsession on the right, because every time they want to talk about, the idea that gay kids are being groomed and being brainwashed to be gay, it's time to talk about Matt Gaetz paying for hookers with Venmo.
Right.
It's time to talk about Dennis Hastert. It's time to talk about, the entire catalog of our old friends who turned out to have some unsavory habits.
Yes.
And it is one thing that Democrats are terrible at doing. And finally, the Democrats need to get their act together and understand that if you create some good drama in DC and cause some good trouble with the 1-6 hearings, you can change the political incentive structure in the country a little bit, and you can get back on track, because the Republicans, what they want to talk about anything but the fact that they wanted to overthrow the government.
And that's the thing. So you said this a couple of times already, if the Democrats fill in the blank, why the hell don't they get that part, the rest of that? Why can't they politically maneuver themselves out of a paper bag opened at both ends?
It is the abiding mystery of our time that no matter how much you try to explain it to them, they will revert back to say, well, wait a minute, people want to talk about guns and climate change.
No, they don't.
They really don't.
No, they really don't.
Really don't. At all.
At all. No.
I mean, and that's the tragedy of it, Michael, is it's like they understand on paper all these things. They get it on paper. And yet there's a gap between what's on paper and how they operate the committees. I mean, look, they just, and all props to Sean Patrick Maloney. They just had a very good fundraising run. I mean, really good. But he still right now does not have his candidates out there in the field do not have an integrated set of messages to go out and run on. And it's got to be more than we're going to fix inflation. You got to turn this thing over. You got to invert it and go after these guys. And you've got to go on offense against them. The one thing I said to somebody this morning was, they're like, well, how did Democrats message on inflation? I'm like, first off, Rick Scott just gave you the sword to cut off their head.
Thank you.
He came out and basically said, everybody has to pay more taxes, including people on Social Security. I'm like, hello. And you don't do it with the old Democratic way of like the crying grandma or throw granny off the cliff. You do it by showing what these corrupt sumbitches in Washington and their friends that lobby them are getting. You show the luxurious, beautiful life. Because you know what? Rick Scott's billionaire friends, they're going to be just fine. So it is a way to invert that populism and that culture, that populist economic stuff on them, and Democrats need to get on that.
They do. I just, I've been, I guess the politician in me, the political strategist, the chairman in me looks at all of this, looks at the Democrats and just shakes my head. And I have spoken with former chairman, the last 3 chairmen of the party. And just if nothing else, inquired, okay, do you guys understand where the country is and how you message against that? You hit on Rick, a very important point right out of the gate. And that this election is not going to be about gas prices per se. It's not going to be about inflation per se. It is going to be the integration of cultural issues that then feed into the resentment about gas prices. So they're trying to make your kid gay. That's why gas is $5.60 a gallon.
It's going to be the gay Antifa, Black Lives Matter, pedophile, Jewish conspiracy theory. It's going to be whatever. I mean, it's like gumbo with these people. They throw everything in the pot.
So when you step back and you look at the space and you say to yourself, where do you go to have the quickest and most impactful moment to sort of change the narrative if you're the political shop in the White House, the DNC, or rank and file Democrats around the country? What do you think that is?
Well, look, I think the thing right now is you have to flip this economic anxiety back onto the Republicans. You have to flip this fear of inflation and prices back on the Republicans. These are the people who said absolutely not to getting the economy going again. These are the people proposing a tax increase at a time where inflation is taxing us all. These are the people who, and again, you don't do it with the old-fashioned Democratic style of like I said, the crying granny or the struggling couple. Those images are too down. They're too downbeat. You need to show what the Republicans are. You just show that these people are gonna they don't care about the economy because they're too rich to give a shit. They don't care about regular people because they're too isolated and corrupt to give a shit. So that's where you start on that front. On the culture war stuff, you got to flip it over because no one wants to hear you as a Democrat arguing about what critical race theory is or isn't. They don't want to hear you arguing about what don't say gay is or isn't. They do and will respond, I think, to showing that Republicans are cruel and shitty, and that they're doing things that because they can abuse their power, they will abuse their power. And I think, again, it always comes back for me. You got to go on offense. It's what we do all the time. We never take our foot off the gas when it comes to waging the right fights. And they need to wage some of the right fights, and they need to get in a posture where they don't feel like they've already lost.
Is there a point
it's a high hill to climb, but you've got to go fight.
So have we passed that moment though? Is that every runway has a limit. They
still have a little time. They still have a little bit of time to go on offense. And one of the things they can do in a lot of their swing races And, let's call it 20 to 25 races in the House, even though they foolishly said we're going to contest 2 races. I don't get it, but okay. In the 20 or 25 races in the House that are going to be in play, they need to go out there and make sure that they turn every Republican into the screaming crazy people from 1-6.
Yeah.
And the conspiracy theorists who believe that there are, that you and I are going to be sent to Gitmo,
right,
and the crazy QAnoners and all that stuff. You got to associate the Republican Party with the most extreme craziness of the Trump wing of the party. And you got to do that in the Senate races as well, where, look, in Pennsylvania, you've got, Dr. Oz versus David McCormick. McCormick is the McConnell candidate. He's going to pretend to be like a Glenn Youngkin. I'm a normal guy.
Right.
Oh, Trump's a little crazy, but I got to vote for him. You got to associate them with, the Dr. Oz part of the party, the JD Vance, Josh Mandel in Ohio part of the party. And you got to make them own all the crazy, make them own all the loony,
right,
edge case cuckoo pants people.
So we talk a lot and about what the Dems need to do in that regard, and try to sort of help them understand what their political moment is that they're seemingly missing. What about Republicans? They're, one of the things that I have found frustrating, going really back to the early days of the Trump administration, was that every Republican was pegged as a Trumper, that this is a reflection of the entire party. You and I know that's damn sure not true, number one.
No, it's not true, but
do you, go ahead. Yeah, you know where I'm going.
But if you're the Democrats, you got to make it true.
You got to make it true.
You got to make it true in the eyes of regular voters. You got to tell them over and over again that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and Madison Cawthorn and Jim Jordan, that's the Republican Party of the future. That's what you're electing. And there are still a lot of Republicans. And weirdly, that number we used to talk about in 2020, the Bannon line of 3 to 8% of voters, we actually think it's expanded a little bit. We think it's now like 9 to 12% of voters, because there is a point where more moderate voters, even in places like Texas and Florida, who will tend to be more suburban, more affluent, more female, they're looking at things now, because contrary to popular belief, the Republican Party was not unified on the subject of abortion. A lot of those people are now looking at what's going on in Texas and Florida and going, whoa, that's a bit much for me. I can't go with that whole idea. A lot of them are looking at the increasing conspiracy theory stuff of, of everyone's a pedophile who disagrees with me. We must burn down Disney. They're starting to see that. And I think there's an opportunity space for Democrats and for outside groups like ours to come into that space and address those people, and to sort of talk through where the lunacy sits and make it associated with, these guys who want to pretend that they're mainstream.
Someone asked me the other day, and so I think this is a great question to ask you, since I stood there for 30 seconds and had to contemplate it. When you look at the party, right, the Republican Party as it is right now, what happens to those folks who look across the aisle and see an equally dysfunctional Democratic Party, but for different reasons? All right.
Sure.
Can't get their head out of their behinds enough to figure out where they are. It
is for,
where do we go? Where do we go? I had someone say, where do we go? Where do I go? And so that becomes, I think, more prescient for people when they look at November and then going into 2024. It's like, what's the deal?
It's a true conundrum for the Democrats, because they are captives. Look, there are 2 parties in this country right now that one of them wants to destroy democracy and burn down the world. The other party wants to worry about whether burning down the world will increase climate change.
Right. Well, it increased.
And they're missing the point. that if we burn down the world, it's done. We're over.
Right.
And it's like, my concern with the Democratic Party is it can't get out of its own way and sell a successful message. And you know, you and I both were around where Bill Clinton sold himself as a moderate technocrat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was popular and it worked.
It worked.
And as much as you and I wanted to label Barack Obama an extreme communist, blah, 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 nobody ever bought our bullshit on it.
Right. He didn't believe it. No.
They didn't buy it in 2008 or 12. We couldn't make that sale because he came across as a technocratic, let's get to work kind of guy. And, you know, the fundamental problem of the Democratic Party scaring off people they should win is it's not enough for you to vote for them in this election cycle. They come across as demanding that you embrace everything they believe in.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these suburban Republican voters who are in play and can be more in play, they don't want to live in the Democratic Party forever. They want to shop there or stay there like an Airbnb for a little while until they find somewhere else they want to go.
Right.
But Democrats are demanding things like, no, if you are going to vote with us, you have to be completely pro-choice and completely pro-gun control. And you've got to scream about climate change every day. And you've got to, you know, talk about the 1619 Project. And you have to shed your whole former life and everything else you believe in. It's like they can't accept an ally. They have to have a convert.
Right. Right.
And they should be looking for allies first and then trying to convert them later.
Right.
If you build the right alliances, you know, you can win and set a barrier against this authoritarian movement. But if you won't accept anything but purity, you might not get anything. It's like I keep telling Democrats, I'm like, listen, just cut the fucking gas tax for the next 6 months. Just eliminate it. Just stop it. The president can do it. He can suspend it for 6 months. And they're like, oh, but what about climate? And I'm like, if you don't suspend the goddamn gas tax and they beat you to death on gas prices every day with suburban voters, guess what? At the end of the day, you're not going to have any climate legislation. No. They're going to pave over this country, you know, from wall to wall. You know, you're not going to get anything. So trying to get everything is a recipe for getting nothing.
How do you assess at this point, as I said, and we're going to get to the foreign policy piece in a moment, because you wrote a very interesting piece back in March that I want to share with folks. And Lincoln Project just dropped about an hour ago a great ad which I want to run that talks about democracy. But this all is connected, and a big part of it is the midterm elections and the January 6th Commission. So first, how do you see or assess the 2022 midterms in light of recent news stories that show, well, Republicans didn't get as great an advantage from redistricting as they thought they would?
Right.
You still have some balls out there on the Supreme Court. Florida. That could change dynamics. So you have these elements. And then two, the future of the January 6th Commission, which I've been trying to help voters understand that on, you know, should Republicans take power, you can just kiss that goodbye.
Okay. Yeah, that will become the Hunter Biden's laptop commission.
Right.
Okay, that's what that turns into. That the next day it's the great threat to democracy posed by Hunter Biden's laptop.
You mean it won't be about the $2 billion that
no, weirdly they will
Jared Kushner just got from the Saudis?
They will find nothing interesting about Jared Kushner's $2 billion payoff from MBS. And so, but what they will do, and Democrats, and I've tried to beat this into their heads. I fought with the people on the commission. Voters need to see a show, a spectacle. They need to be shown what the hell happened. They need to have those people dragged up where they have to admit, yes, we conspired to overthrow a free, fair, and legal election. Because it's what they did.
That's what they did.
And the idea that you let them get away with that and you don't insist on accountability for those people is maddening to me. And back in October, when I got in my first fight with the 1/6 Commission, I had two sources inside the commission, two separate people who don't even know each other.
Right.
Do not intersect at all. And they both told me, yeah, they really want to get off this so that Congress can talk about prescription drug prices and infrastructure. I was like, the fuck? And when I called them out on it, I got yelled at. They're like, this is so untrue. And then suddenly they picked up the pace.
Right,
so it may be time for me to poke them in the nose again.
No, but you have to. I mean,
that is the thing. You can't
they've done the work. They've got evidence. They've got the goods, and
they are very nervous right now about how they make the sale with the public. And they're nervous because the Republicans are going to do what they always do and have stunts and interrupt. And Matt Gaetz will stand outside with a bullhorn and all these other things, right? And that level of, they feel like they've been, that the showmanship deficit with the Republicans is so extreme that they lose their confidence in doing this. They should be confident. They should get our old buddy Kurt Bardella, who used to be the press guy and the comms director for the oversight committee, where he would like generate 1,000 damn news stories every week about what the committee was doing. And while this is a serious process, they need to entertain the American people's desire for a spectacle, for a show,
drama, for the show,
and for drama. That's it. No, you got the word I was actually looking for. They should want to give the American people some drama in this thing. It's The Bachelor. It's Survivor. Yeah. It's all the format of reality television. And Americans, look, they picked a reality television president, for fuck's sake. Their brains are wired now, not for long discourse and intellectual pursuit. Their brains are now wired for good guys, bad guys, conflict, resolution.
Yeah.
Every story
they want to see the chase scene. They want to see the chase scene. They want to see the perp blowing up. All right.
They want to see the perp walk. They want to see the chase scene. They want to see justice done.
And you can do that. You can do that with everything that we know and have seen. I mean, just ask yourself, what made January 6th so dramatic? It was watching people climbing the fucking wall. Yep. It was watching people taking flags and jabbing them at police officers. It was watching people spray beer piss at cops, right?
Yep.
So that's, if January 6th was just a bunch of people standing out screaming at the building, or because they didn't want, they didn't want to create a negative impression.
If January 6th was a Trump rally, nothing would be happening right now.
That's right.
But the violence and the shock that was a designed thing that Steve Bannon and Roger Stone and Alex Jones and Ali Alexander and all these other shitbirds put together, all these people planned this thing out to shock and awe the American people and to buy time for Trump's legal strategy to overthrow the election. It really is that consequential. And if the 1/6 Commission doesn't understand that the politics intersect with the right thing to do, they need to really reconsider their work.
So how does that feed into the 2022 election narrative?
Well, that narrative, again, it allows you, if you're smart, to associate every Republican running with the people that both schemed to make 1/6 happen and the people that invaded the Capitol on 1/6. And so you get to go out there into the states and make these Republican nominees. Mm-hmm. And because by that point, a lot of the primaries will be settled. So let's just say it's Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. You get out there and you say, the 1/6 Commission discovered the following things. Do you still think the election was stolen? Is Donald Trump the real president? Why haven't you done, why won't you say it? You get to wedge them against Trump, and he loses his mind when people aren't 100%.
That's right.
for him.
And the moment they start hemming and hawing, he's ready to throw them not under the bus, but he wants to run the bus over and over and over again.
That is correct. The minute they're not 100% on board with every single thing he wants, this thing goes south in a hurry.
We're having a great conversation with my buddy Rick Wilson. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to look a little bit overseas and seeing how the foreign policy narrative, the war in Ukraine, is playing here at home. We'll be back with Rick Wilson right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the Michael Steele podcast. And my buddy Rick Wilson and I are kind of looking at 2022, this January 6th commission, the state of play here at home, and assessing exactly why Democrats don't see what we see. Number one, y'all help a brother out, because we don't get it. We don't see why they don't get what we don't get, what we get. But also now, Rick, I want to open up this part of our conversation with a little something that literally dropped about an hour ago from the Lincoln Project, and you guys tweeted out, if we reelect Donald Trump in 2024, we send a message to the rest of the world that we do not care about our democracy and that we support criminals in power. Don't miss Rick Wilson on the pod, which is the Lincoln Project pod, but he's also here with us on this one. But I do want to play this because I thought it was really to the point.
I think the whole position we find ourselves in with Jared and with Donald right now is, if Trump is reelected, these people will recognize that they have been not punished for the behavior they engaged in and exhibited over the past 6 years, and in fact were rewarded for it. And so once you reward a criminal or a thief or a scumbag for doing something criminal, they'll do more of it. You will always get more of what you pay for in this world.
Why don't people get that? What is it about as you juxtapose the democracy narrative in Ukraine, when you have a president of Ukraine who, by every account, I mean, this brother is like, I get up, if I didn't have bad knees, sign me up, right? So you've got that, and then here at home, you've got Republicans saying that he's the bad guy. And so why don't people get what you say in this, I think, very important message, that if you don't figure this out, this doesn't go well for us. Democracy does end, and the criminals, the bad guys, win in an unprecedented way.
Yeah, it really is a moment of enormous consequence. And part of it comes down to the fact, you and I grew up in the just win baby culture of the Republican Party. Get to the finish line, no matter how you do it, get there. And if you have to skirt the edge, you get there. The Republican Party today, it's not just win, it's just win and destroy.
Yeah.
And I encourage the Democrats to understand that Republicans view this as an existential battle for utter control. They will stop doing elections in a meaningful way if they win what they want to win.
Yeah.
They'll stop. It'll be like the Ba'ath Party in Iraq used to be, where every 2 years they had an election, but everybody that won a seat in the Iraqi parliament was a family member of Saddam Hussein, and Saddam Hussein got 107% of the vote.
Right.
Yeah. I want to just shake my Democratic friends and tell them, you got to stop worrying about policy. You've got to win the fight about politics, and you got to win the fight about personalities, and you got to win the fight about an emotional appeal to the American people that calls their better angels out, but also kicks the living shit out of bad guys. And if the Democrats don't understand that corruption is the killer app, I can't help them. It is a great look. You and I both remember, we're old enough to remember 1994, when everybody thought, oh, the House Bank and the House Post Office, that's nothing. For everybody that's younger than us, y'all go Google it. But we turned that issue into a spear into the heart of the Democratic Party. We communicated to voters, they're corrupt, they're cheating, they're stealing from the taxpayers. Have your revenge upon them.
Led to the resignation of the Speaker of the House.
Yeah,
yeah,
it is. It is absolutely made a Speaker of the House. And the Republican Party today is so corrupt from top to bottom. You know, you got a guy like Rick Scott who's running the Senate committee. He is running on a massive federal tax increase for middle class and working voters. Rick Scott is a guy who went from being worth nothing to stealing $300 million in the largest fraud case in American history when he ran HCA.
Mm-hmm.
To when he ran for office, he had about 200 million bucks in the bank. And now somehow he's done nothing but be in politics for the last 12 years. And now somehow he's worth $1 billion. These guys are lavishly corrupt. They have exploited the system. The Democrats need to convert on this in the fastest way possible. Corruption is a killer app.
It really is. And you touch on a number of those points in an opinion piece that you did in the Washington Post back on March 18th, entitled "The GOP is About to Come After Biden on Ukraine."
Oh, yes.
You noted, quote, "Republicans slapped blue and yellow flag pins on their Joseph A. Banks suits and took a short break from anti-vaccine bleeding and blaming President Biden for global inflation. This moment of unity looked promising. Who could miss all those congressional Republicans cheering as loudly as Democrats during Volodymyr Zelensky's address to Congress?" You go on. "Republicans specialize at turning Democratic successes overseas into disasters. It's a slow burn strategy designed to trigger an outraged culture that doesn't stop at the water's edge. GOP leaders don't care about reality. Their audience doesn't care about the truth, and their political media apparatus always stays on message." Not only is that applicable to what we see happening more broadly in Europe, It is also very much applicable to what we've been talking about here at home. And it is a constant thread for Republicans to make that case over and over. It's a discipline unlike any other discipline in the party. When they have you in the crosshairs, there is no release.
No, and you know, I have been on the receiving end and the delivery end of that kind of attack.
Same here.
And it is not fun. You know this as well as anybody. It is not fun. And it is a tough place to live.
Hell, I still had people questioning me about a strip club in Los Angeles that I never went to. But
of course,
that was
believe me. There's
job,
always
right?
there's always an Oppo file out there with some fantasy on it. My favorite piece of Oppo is Wilson paid off his mortgage. You know, every month I still seem to write that check. I don't know how that happened. You know, it's all the craziness. And it really comes down, and I say this a lot, and I'm blue in the face sometimes, but that discipline on the right of staying on message, when the leader of the party says something in the Republican Party, folks, it will be listened to, it will be followed, it will not be deviated from, or you're going to get your ass handed to you. And in the Democratic Party, you know, we've got progressives who are blowing up Joe Biden on the left. You got Manchin and Sinema blowing up Joe Biden on the right. If the Democrats really want to do one thing, if they did one single thing in a 30,000-foot way, it's get Biden's positives up. You get Biden's positives up somewhere in the high 40s, and it's a really different roadmap, a really different electoral map. And all the other things that I tell them they have to do would be a lot easier. And all the stuff I've said, you know, about what they need to do about the culture war and the economic stuff, that's because Biden's numbers are in the low 40s, high 30s.
Yeah.
If they could jack his number, and look, if they had $25 million laying around in the bank, I would run a positive Joe Biden digital campaign for the next 2 months and let that start to work the numbers, and it would. But this is not how the Democratic Party thinks about these things.
So that then leads me to a conversation that I had this week when I was in California.
Right.
And of course, everyone asks about the Lincoln Project, and very mindful of the role that the Lincoln Project played in that seminal moment, that Morning in America ad, which
Right.
I think in many respects changed the complete trajectory of that election.
Modestly speaking, I think you're right. It was the moment we got a lever onto Trump mentally.
So with that in mind, do you see that opportunity, despite everything we've just described and talked about with respect to both parties, but particularly the Democratic Party, to actually go on offense politically?
I do.
Do Lincoln Project does the Lincoln Project find itself being asked to yet again save the country?
You know, we no matter how rough last year was for us, and we had, you know, look, we got a lot of spears thrown at us left and right last year.
Yeah.
Some of it from our own doing,
yeah,
you know, but we never stopped fighting. We never got out of the battle. And we told people from the beginning, as long as you want us in this fight, we're going to stay in this fight. And I truly believe that we have a unique ability, a unique position to communicate in a way that is liberated from all the traditional pressures of Democratic candidates and campaigns. And I say this a lot. I'm not a Democrat, but I love our democracy.
mm-hmm.
I'm not a Republican anymore, but I love our republic. And I will do whatever I can to preserve it. We'll do whatever we can to preserve it as an organization, because we understand where the ground of the fight really is. It's where the authoritarian movement meets the democratic movement. And if you look over in Ukraine, you're seeing what happens at the end of the process,
Right.
where an authoritarian movement meets a democratic movement.
Right.
That's the 10 on the scale, and we're at a 3 here in America. But we've got to fight so we don't ever get to that 10 on the scale. And so we're still in the battle every day. You know, we had our best month since February of 2021, last month. We've been back in the center of the fight on a lot of.
What kind of initiatives are you looking to launch, Rick? How are you guys applying strategy, looking down the next 6-7 months?
Right, we're going to target 4 or 5 of the key Senate races, and those will play out, you know, depending on how the primaries play out. We're going to play in places like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona. We're going to target a small number of House races where we can make a critical difference in appealing to that narrow band of voters we're going to need to capture, the ban-in-line voters. We're going to work in a couple of Secretary of State's races because we think those are highly critical for 2024. Because if you have these stooges that will just certify the election for Trump no matter what the outcome is, we're in big trouble. We'll touch 1 or 2 governor's races, I think. We're also going to continue our corporate responsibility campaign, which pressures these corporations that are providing a lot of money to Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, even though they said we're not going to fund the insurrectionists, they're funding the insurrection. So we're going to continue that. We've launched a thing called the Union, which has activated over 50,000 volunteers around the country right now, where we match their skills to their interests like nobody else has done. And so we're going to deploy those people into these fights. We're going to continue to set the national narrative, we think, on a lot of the key issues. And we're going to show people how to fight. We're going to show them how to push back. We're going to show them how to get in the battle effectively and efficiently. And we're going to show them they don't have to be afraid. Half the Republican position right now, thinking that they've won, is they've convinced Democrats they're going to win.
Right. That's right. That's right. That is a key element of it. And so that then for me looks back at the success of 20, knowing that you guys pulled about 6 or 7% of that Republican base away from Trump.
Right.
How do you do that again? How do you get Republicans who will probably be of more of a mind to go back home? You've already mentioned that earlier in the conversation.
Well, look,
how do you pull them back?
A lot of them do want to go back home. And that's just political gravity exercising itself. The first part of that is we have to show them that the Republican Party that's in their heads is not the real Republican Party anymore.
Right.
that it's much more Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and conspiracy theories and violent insurrection than it is low taxes, individual liberty, and the Constitution. Because that part of the party, look, if that was the Republican Party, it'd still be a Republican.
Right.
If it was a party about free markets, individual liberty, the Constitution, and the
we'd
rule
all
of
be in a
law,
very different space right now.
here we go, but it's not. It's about conspiracy theories and race wars and lunatic cultural wars and the idea of expanding government in order to do the things you want to do on the social conservative front. That party we can talk to people and push them out of that party. The Democrats have to do their part by not scaring the shit out of our voters.
Right.
They need to do that. They need to make sure that they don't let defund the police become the centerpiece of the message. They need to invert the culture war and push it back onto Republicans. When they're called pedophiles and groomers, they need to say, get the fuck out of here. Why don't you talk about Matt Gaetz?
Right.
Why don't you talk about Dennis Hastert? Why don't you talk about Donald Trump being a running buddy with Jeffrey Epstein? They've got to go on offense on all these things. And I think that's where that lets some Republican voters have permission to vote Democratic. Look, we were able to convince a lot of Republicans in 20 to vote against Trump, but we couldn't convince as many Republicans to vote down ballot.
Right. That's where I was going. Right. Because this is more like that down ballot race in 22 than it was the presidential race in 20.
Right. Now, look, Trump may nationalize this race for us because he's starting to intervene in races. He's starting to get loud again. And I want to tell my Democratic friends one thing. If you don't do the job you have to do in 22, on election night in November of this year, if the Republicans have a big blowout, Donald Trump will announce his presidential campaign and begin that campaign that night.
Mm-hmm.
And in January of 23, the Republicans will begin their show trial of Hunter Biden.
That's right.
They will impeach Joe Biden and Vice President Harris.
Yep.
They will begin a year and a half of political torture where nothing will get accomplished, nothing will happen. They will not get any more judges confirmed. They will not get any legislation passed. It will be over. And they will be on defense. And look, they better do this work in 22 because the 24 Senate map sucks for them. It is it is going to be a ditch full of dismembered bodies. It is bad. They need to do the work now, and they need to support the efforts now to keep the party from scaring off the people they have to win over.
Well, there are a lot of lessons in this conversation, but that last point is the bottom line, because as you and I have said for the last 18 or so months, 20 was a run up for 22, and 22 and 20 together are an absolute playbook for 24, because now they know where the holes are in the plan, in the strategy. And they've been backfilling against that with the legislation around the country on voting, on and then of course doing the whole cultural war setup, CRT and all of that bullshit.
All of it.
And there is no political opponent that's ready and willing at this stage, in my view, to push back up against that. That would be the Democratic Party.
That's at this point, that is exactly correct, my friend.
Well,
that was a cheerful note.
I have a reason to go get a gin and tonic.
I always have a reason to get a gin and tonic.
Absolutely. Rick Wilson, my man, he's
sir.
Just a one of a kind, folks, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, ad maker, leading conservative critic of not just Donald Trump, but bad Republicans, just bad Republicans. And I appreciate when this brother gets a chance to sit down and share some insights.
Happy to be with you.
Take to heart what he said, folks, because it's serious and it's real. Rick, thank you, my man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.
You
Talk
got
to
it,
you
buddy.
soon, my friend.
That'll do it
Yeah.
for this conversation, folks. Don't forget to check us out on all the appropriate podcasts out there where you get your download. The Spreaker app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, all of those good places. I love it when you do the download thing. Don't forget to do that. And certainly, if you like this episode, hey, go to the Spreaker app and make a comment. It's always fun when you do that as well. It helps me improve my game, as we like to say. So until next time, be safe, be well, take care. Things are opening up. Go out and enjoy, but still keep in mind there's some crazies out there who aren't vaccinated or taking all the precautions that they should. But do enjoy yourselves until we meet again. Later.